Well, one person who's been watching, obviously, the status of not just weather for farms and what that does for the Saskatchewan economy, but most importantly, the forest fire fight in the north. Premier Brad Wall has been there a couple of times in and out of La Ronge, and we find the Premier in Swift Current this morning. Premier, thanks for taking our call.
Morning, John.
We've been trying to connect with you to talk fires, and I know this has been a pretty tense time provincially. What do you know today about the prognosis and just how these things are being tackled?
Well, I'll join the ops call as I've been doing at 9:30, and that will provide all of those on the call, obviously including myself, all the details, the latest in terms of weather. And John, you may well know that Wildfire Management Branch actually we have a meteorologist on staff, and obviously they work with Environment Canada and all the other forecasters, and each morning there's a weather report, a weather brief on what's upcoming. We need to know in all the theaters of operation what's going to happen with respect to the wind, and of course, everyone's eye is also to the future in terms of rain and cooler temperatures that you've just highlighted, but really we need to know, and the wildfire management teams need to know what will be the wind circumstances in all of the areas, west and east side of the province, on any given day, so they know what to expect from different fires and where perhaps to be focused. So we'll know more about exactly what's happening today in 40 minutes or so after we have the ops call. But it's been a bit of a mixed bag over the last number of days in terms of weather and its implications. We've had days where perhaps the wind's been favorable and it's blown the smoke away, but it's come with hotter temperatures, and maybe in some other parts of the province that same prevailing wind might cause fire problems. So it's been a bit back and forth, but our teams of fire crews have done, I believe, an amazing job of protecting values, as they say. Those are infrastructure property, sometimes cabins, and most importantly, communities and major infrastructure like highways. They've done a remarkable job, and hats off to all of them, including, of course, local fire departments who've been responding, and local leadership, First Nations, and community leadership across the area that's been challenged by these 100-plus fires.
You've got 1,500 people now fighting the fires. For a number of days, that number was sort of static at around 500 to 600. Now military, now more people being trained up. Were we late getting to this high a number of firefighters?
Well, we've had higher complements of firefighters trained in the past. The challenge has been that we've had not the challenge, the good thing's been over the last number of years, we've had relatively mild seasons in terms of forest fires. And so those who are trained for firefighting, they'll take other seasonal employment, or the numbers just have dropped off. And so, we've had, I think the wildlife fire management would have said, look, this is a good complement we have for the fires we expect. I remember being in La Ronge, I guess it would have been a week ago Friday, and meeting with the on-the-ground commanders, those who were coordinating the situation. And that was just before the fire known as the egg fire really sort of blew up that day, that Friday. And there was just a concern that at that point, perhaps the complement was large enough, but teams were about to duty out. And so we needed support, and that's when I decided that we should phone the armed forces, because of course the amount of training they require is less than someone sort of coming in off the street or someone who's not been certified, because they've got some of the basic training out of the way. And so we put together, as you know, our folks put together a summary of about, I think, a 4 or 5 hour training program for a Type 3 firefighter, and we had those folks deployed really within 48 hours, which was quite remarkable. Since then, we've had more volunteers come forward, First Nations and others, and so we've been accommodating them in terms of training. 250 have come forward, 90 being trained from reserves this week. They've started 4-day training yesterday, and then we're working with PAGC, the Prince Albert Grand Council, to do 2 more groups of 30. And there's some reason for optimism about the status of firefighting in general, in addition to the increased number of resources we have now.
Premier Brad Wall, is there more a need, though, on the ground to have, again, notwithstanding good years as we've had the last while, more people just simply with the skills and the training to be able to respond if you get a year like this?
There is, and that's why we offer training throughout the year and each and every year. Unfortunately, we've seen a drop-off in terms of people wanting to take the training. And so we've encouraged both First Nations leaders and local leaders, as a result of this particular event, but during the event, we need to make sure we're encouraging community members there to avail themselves of the training, because we put on classes and the seats aren't full. And it's easy to understand. It's just not been top of mind. We've been dealing with floods in the last number of years, not fires. And so we've seen a drop-off in terms of those taking the training. There have been some occupational health and safety standards that have sort of precluded others who, from a common sense perspective, have probably, they fought fires a few years ago, but we have to abide by these OH&S regulations, of course, as an employer, just like any other employer does. And so there needs to be this augmented training, and we need to see more seats filled in these training classes. So we're hoping leadership, First Nations and community leadership, especially across the north, will encourage residents to take to fully subscribe to these training courses that are provided by the government.
Premier Brad Wall, the update on northern fires. How much and by what percentage have we blown the forest firefighting budget?
Oh, we were through the budget long ago, John. We were through it into June, and so. But, this is a similar situation to the floods that we were fighting. As you know, the last couple of years, last year in particular, we had historic events, flood events happen that you just don't budget for. And so what we did was the direction was, let's worry about dealing with this particular disaster, making sure people are safe, getting them back into their homes as soon as possible, and then cleaning up, and then we'll worry about the finances. And, we came through some very significant flood-related costs last year and still balanced the budget. Public accounts was just presented, as you know, John, and we held expenses to within about 1% of budget, and we just did what we needed to do to balance it. We'll do the same thing here. We'll work hard to balance the budget after the fact. In the meantime, we're going to make sure people are protected, property and infrastructure is protected wherever possible, and we get people home as soon as possible as well.
Premier Brad Wall with us, getting a quick update on the status of what's going on. When you look, though, at the budget, what are we talking about in terms of projections? I think we saw the figure about $100 million is the budget, and, if we're past that, are we into, 3, 4, 500 million? What's the estimate?
I just can't. I don't have a speculation for you there, John. We have finance working on those numbers, but, in order to get those numbers, you'd have to have those who are either leading and or sometimes directly involved in the firefight itself, doing other work. And we simply don't want that right now. We'll have the numbers soon, and we'll make sure they're very transparently reported, and then we'll work hard to ensure that, as we have the last 7 years, that the budget remains balanced as well. But first things first, so we'll fight the fire and get people home as soon as possible.
Before I let you go, the premiers meet every summer. I guess, would you call it the Council of the Federation now? Newfoundland is the site. Now, is that meeting underway yet, or are you going to parts of it, or what's the plan?
Well, it is. It'll be underway, I guess, later this evening. I think most premiers will have been there by then. And then there's the meeting with the National Aboriginal Organizations tomorrow. My office will be represented at the meeting by a deputy minister, but I will not be there. And I'm making a decision today as to whether or not to attend the summer premiers meeting. If not, we'll have representation. I haven't really been thinking a lot about that meeting, frankly. It's not a top priority, and there's some important issues to be discussed there, but nothing as important as what's going on here. So if it looks like we've got more progress coming our way as a result of better weather and all these resources, that could change. There's a couple issues. We want to see continued progress on the agreement on internal trade, John, where you and I have talked about interprovincial trade barriers that need to come down. And although the deadline for a new agreement is October, I think premiers can provide some impetus to that at this meeting. And, there will be those at the meeting, again, calling for a mandatory increase in CPP contributions, and Saskatchewan opposes that. We think we don't need a payroll tax right now, especially right now, given the state of all of the economies in Canada. We saw jobs created in our province in the last jobs report released Friday, which is very good news given some of the challenges, but what we don't need is another payroll tax. So that might be one issue that I'll be certainly engaged in if the decision's made to go.
Premier, good chatting, and we'll talk again soon.
All the best.
Premier Brad Wall joining us in Swift Current this morning.